This episode is brought to you by my fertility awareness programs. Master fertility awareness and improve your menstrual cycle health at the same time. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme for more information. That's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 201. Welcome to the 201st episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I recently created a free 3-part video series all about the fertility awareness method and how you can utilize the fertility awareness method to develop body literacy. So to really connect you with your cycles and really understand what's happening in your body. And so if you haven't had a chance to get your copy of my free video series, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAM101. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAM101 to gain access to my 3-part video series all about fertility awareness charting. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/FAM101. I have a great episode for you today. I'm really excited to share my episode with Isa Herrera. And in today's episode, we're talking about pelvic floor muscles and how to strengthen them, why they matter, why they're so important. This is a great interview. I was so excited to chat with Isa. We had such a great discussion, so I'm really excited to share it with you. So informative and so important that women understand and know how important it is to take care of your pelvic floor and to know what to look for, to know when you should be looking into it further. Because I don't know about you, but no one ever told me anything about my pelvic floor as a woman growing up and how important it is to pay attention to the signs that there could be something wrong and how the strength of the pelvic floor muscle can change with pregnancy, with age, with different things and different challenges throughout life. So I'm fairly certain you're going to appreciate today's episode as much as I did. And so if you're relatively new to charting, or even if you have, several months or even a year or more of charting under your belt, but you're still struggling to interpret what you're seeing on your charts, you're really wanting to get clear on what information you can derive about your overall health and fertility from your menstrual cycle charts, I offer a number of programs to support you in doing just that. So make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme to take a look at the different programs that I offer and the different ways that we can work together. And also, if you're not sure which program would be the best fit, you can always set up a complimentary 50-minute consultation with me where we can actually go through and talk about the different programs that they offer and where would be the best fit for you. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. Now let's jump into today's episode. And today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Isa Herrera, to the show. Isa is a leading authority in the field of integrative pelvic health and has successfully treated thousands of women suffering from incontinence, prolapse, and sexual dysfunction. She's the creator of pelvicpainrelief.com, and her goal is to empower women to achieve lifelong pelvic health and wellness. In her new book, Pelvic Alchemy, Isa shares her secrets about the right way to Kegel, how to perform your own self-exams and massages, how to strengthen your core, and how to reconnect to your orgasms. And in today's episode, we'll be talking about how to keep your pelvic floor muscles healthy and a ton of other important information about pelvic health. I'm so excited to have you on the show, Isa. Thank you for being here.
Oh, super excited. Thank you so much, Lisa. This is going to be an extraordinary journey for us. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sending me a copy of your book. I was taking a read through it before our interview, and what I really liked about it is that it's very practical, and I love how you really take us through specific practical, like these are the exercises you do, this is how you do them, and it really allows us to kind of take an active role in this. So I really appreciate what you've done.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things that one of my main values is that I believe in empowerment healthcare, and I believe that women should actually know how to take care of themselves. So my thing when I write my books, and this is my 5th book that I've written, is all about how can I get this practicality to the women in a way that is easy to reproduce, right? Because a lot of people go to healthcare practitioners, or they'll go to massage therapists or anybody else, but then they leave and they don't know how to take care of themselves. So when I started my practice over a decade ago, I decided that I always want women to be able to do what I do. Mm-hmm. And so I bring it down to that level of practicality because it is really important to have self-care. Self-care is, it's the only way that we can actually just really come into our own power. So for me, the self-care and these techniques are super important. So I am super excited to be talking about them with you today and how they relate to fertility.
Well, I love that so much. And before we really dive into the meat of our interview today, I'd love to hear about how you got into the field of pelvic floor therapy. What drew you to this field, and even what drew you to write this book at this time, your book, Female Pelvic Alchemy?
Oh, thank you for asking me that. I always say if I had had the most perfect birth and I didn't have any obstetrical trauma, I think I still would have been working at the gym as a PT doing sports. And that's how I started. But after I had my baby, my pelvic floor was just blown to pieces. And I suffered. And I had a brand new baby, and I was in extraordinary amounts of pain. And I went to my doctor, and my doctor says, everything looks normal. This is a normal part of healing in the postpartum period. And I said, okay, fine. So I went home, and 3 months later, I had pain, and I had suffering from incontinence and, prolapse. I call that the trifecta. I went back to the doctor. He gave me to the nurse, and the nurse said, no, this is a normal part of healing. And so perhaps it was my female intuition, but I knew that what I was feeling wasn't normal. Maybe it was common, but it wasn't normal. And so I went on a mission to find out what was going on with me. And I had just graduated PT school. So that was very interesting because in PT school, they didn't teach me a lick of women's health. So I had to go out there and really shadow the top doctors and take a whole bunch of classes and use my body as, as a guinea pig to figure out what is it that involves postpartum healing and female healing in general when there's sexual pain and incontinence. And so when I look back at my birth, I'm like very grateful because without that happening to me, I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't have been, having my practice, written the books. So for me, it's like you always have to find the light in the darkness. It's like, okay, so that was my journey. So how, when you're in the absolute, when you're feeling the lowest, how do you build yourself back up? And so that was my healing journey. That's how I began studying pelvic floor therapy. And then I realized that the pelvic floor muscle is the conduit. It is the first chakra. It is the foundation of our entire being. And if there's something going on in that chakra, in those muscles, and you're not feeling out of sorts, and then the female typically feels out of sorts too. Like you feel like there's something just not right and you can't put your finger on it.
Yeah, no, it's so, I really like asking that question at the beginning of interviews to get a sense of what draws everyone to their work. And I find it fascinating that, and it makes complete sense that many of us have a very personal connection to the work that we do. And you mentioned PT, so I'm assuming that's physical therapy. So you went to physical therapy school and there was no mention of pelvic floor muscles.
No, and that was crazy because I remember, and it's ironic, right? Because I've always, I started my career as a personal trainer, and I was one of the first ones in New York City to teach pre and postnatal exercise. I mean, we're talking about 25 years ago, before anyone was doing it. And so I went to PT school to learn more about women's health. And when I landed in PT school, which is the experience not only of myself, but many doctors and midwives too, and other people who deal with the pelvic floor, there was very little education. And so that took me by surprise. It was my birth that sort of threw me into the journey of learning how to work with women's most private areas and how to heal it and how to, help them overcome pain, incontinence, fertility issues, menstrual cramps. All of these conditions are connected to the pelvic floor.
Well, and in your case, I think there's so many things that struck me about your personal journey into this, but one of the things that struck me is that you had to then rely on your own intuition and go and do your own research and figure it out because you kept being told that it was normal. And it makes me wonder, how many women out there are currently having very similar symptoms as to what you were having, and are continually, even to this day, still being told that it's normal.
And you want to hear something that's really absolutely outrageous, Lisa, is that there's 30 million women in the US alone suffering from some form of chronic pelvic pain. That's 1 out of 3. And still the average woman sees 4 to 5 doctors. I'm actually writing a paper on this for a magazine, and sees 4 to 5 doctors before she even gets a diagnosis. And then when the woman does talk to her doctor about this pain, they get poo-poofed. Oh, you're being emotional, you're being hysterical, you're being overly sensitive. And they downplay our pain, and they, relegate us to the sidelines. And so women are what I call on the Dr. Rose show, seeing one physician to one physician to one physician until they actually land on the person who can help them. And that's really due to a big lack of education in the medical school training. And I would say midwives too, but midwives are better. So you get these women who are on the Dr. Rose show given medications they don't need, surgeries they don't need, when in essence, what really needs to be addressed is the pelvic floor muscles as the main conduit of the female body.
And so in your case then, what was it that brought your path full circle? What was it that led you to heal your own pelvic floor?
I think what led me to heal was I had an aha moment. After I started working on my own body and learning, I had an aha moment that we can heal these conditions naturally, that we don't need medication, don't need surgeries, that we don't need injections. So for me, I'm an integrative therapist, so I incorporate different types of modalities, sort of like laser therapy. I incorporate exercise, meditation, vaginal massages, vaginal stretching, abdominal rolling, whatever it is that I need to do to get a woman to be completely and healed in that area. And the thing is, because the pelvic floor muscles are, I call them like Grand Central Station, because I live in New York City, they deeply affect the upper and the lower extremity. So sometimes even like a deep hip pain or back pain can be correlated to pelvic floor muscle dysfunction. So I use integrative and holistic tools to get women from point A to point B.
Well, so I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through your own story. And there's just that common theme. I mean, on this podcast, we talk about the fertility awareness method. We talk about issues of fertility and all these different types of female-centered challenges. And the common theme is that often modern medicine was built and designed based on the male body. And so specific issues that pertain to women, there's this huge hole where they're not addressed. So I really appreciate you taking us through your story. And I would love to start by really defining, I think that all of us have heard the term pelvic floor muscles, and we all have a sense of like, okay, it's something to do with Kegels, but could you take us, we kind of get it, but we don't really get it. So could you take us through and like, what exactly does it mean when we say pelvic floor muscles? Give us a picture of where that is in our body, and when they're healthy, when our pelvic floor muscles are healthy, what I mean? Like what their role is, so that we understand what it's like when they're not.
Okay, perfect. So the pelvic floor muscles are sort of like the cradle of your being. They're like a basket. They hold things. They hold the uterus, they hold the bladder, and they support other organs, right? Mm-hmm. They're also deeply connected to the lumbar spine, to the hips, and to sexual function. So I usually say the pelvic floor muscles has 5 functions, and I call them the 5 S's. They're sexual, they are supportive. So if your pelvic floor muscles are functioning great, you're having amazing orgasms, okay, that are not petering out. If they're supportive, you're feeling all your organs really nicely supported, even your uterus, okay? This is the main thing about fertility here. They are stabilization. They play a big factor in stabilization. So if there's an issue with the lumbar spine, pain, or hips, you're going to get it in dysfunction with the stabilization. They're also like a sump pump. So they sort of have like a lymphatic ability to them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they sort of like, they have a little sump pump to them, right? And they're sphincteric. So if the muscles are weak, or then you're having issues, or if they're perfect, you're not leaking at all with laughing, coughing, sneezing, or running, or when you're picking up your kids, or when you have, when you're in your first day of your cycle, when everything is really, the uterus is really full and putting a lot of pressure on the bladder. So those are the 5 S's, right? So in the perfect world, you're having great orgasms, you're having no menstrual cramps, your fertility is absolutely perfect, you have no low back pain, and, there's no leaking.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no pelvic congestion either.
So that's the lymphatic part? So
that's the lymphatic
somehow
part, yeah.
Regulating lymphatic flow in that area?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, and so I feel like you have painted a bit of a picture of when the pelvic floor is, like, what happens when it's not, when it's maybe damaged or when there's something wrong. But maybe you could kind of just deepen our understanding into what it means for a woman when there's an issue with her pelvic floor, and also let us know, what types of situations could result in, like, why would you have an issue with your pelvic floor? What would have to happen?
Okay, so I think that the majority of women would think that the pelvic floor will have an issue if you've just had a baby. That's probably the most obvious one. But the pelvic floor can become strained, or when a woman is in sports or running, if she's sitting a lot, if she's constipated. Right? It's a big sign of pelvic floor muscle dysfunction, because the pelvic floor muscles have to release and let go in order to get the urine out and to get the feces out. Right? A lot of women who have tightness in the pelvic, and I'm actually the no Kegel physical therapist, because I believe in more having balance and suppleness. And I think if you're missing that suppleness and balance and flexibility in the pelvic floor, most women tend to be too tight and not too loose. And I think that that's something that a lot of women are told, just go home and do your Kegels, and then they get into trouble because it affects their fertility and their menstrual cycles. So for me, it's kind of like the most important thing about the pelvic floor is to have strength, endurance, but also to have the flexibility and suppleness and fluidity in it, so that, everything is being maintained and held, very gently and in this proper position, and you're not prolapsing. Because a lot of women have, pelvic organ prolapse. So actually 49% of women have pelvic organ prolapse, and it's not just due to having a baby. It's due to impact exercising and straining and going to the gym and pushing yourself hard, and, stuff along those lines.
Okay, well, I want to come back to prolapse. I think we should delve into Kegels. I also grew up hearing that we should be doing our Kegels. And I'm a big fan of Sex and the City. I would joke that, like, there's always a Sex and the City reference. Like, I can always think of every situation. I'm like, oh yeah, there was that episode. But I literally just had a flash of Samantha being like, I'm doing them right now. But, like, I think a lot of women do their Kegels based on that whole idea that if your vagina is tighter, sex will be more pleasurable if you have a male partner. And so it's almost like there's this pressure to do that because, sex will only be pleasurable if your vagina is tight. And I think that's kind of one of those very interesting, like, your body is there for someone else's pleasure.
Yeah, for somebody else's pleasure. And the crazy thing is, actually, the tighter you are, the less, you're going to reach the mountaintop and have great orgasms. Right. So maybe it's okay for the man for your vagina to be super tight because you're giving him pleasure. But then when does your pleasure come in? Where's the balance, and where is your, then it can become an issue of, like, your orgasms are either petering out, they're non-existent, or you sort of reach the top and then you just can't even, like, fully come. Or there could be an issue with pain. And the thing with pain is, like, I'm not just talking about pain. I'm talking about when you have to shift position or something doesn't feel right. That could be interpreted as pain too. I think that we start to think that as pain, but pain can be discomfort, or something just doesn't feel right in the vaginal area right? So I think that women start to do these Kegels because the media and everybody else is constantly telling us how loose we are in our vaginas and that our vaginas have to be super tight in order to pleasure men. And then at that point, then we put ourselves behind a man and not besides a man.
His pleasure comes first, so I have to make sure I do my
Right.
Kegels. So I don't want to assume that everyone who's listening to our episode knows what Kegels are, although it is quite common and popular. So maybe share, give us that description of what exactly a Kegel muscle is and why you are the no Kegel practitioner.
Okay, well, I'm a no Kegel. Well, a Kegel exercise is when you're actually lifting and bringing together all four walls of the pelvic floor of the vagina. The vagina has four walls. And then you're bringing them together as you exhale. And then you're sort of lifting them up, lifting your vagina up towards your nose, right? Which is why it's very important to have the proper imagery. I mean, most women don't know how to do a Kegel correctly, which gets them into trouble too. So it's really about, imagine the vagina is a box and a tunnel. And you want to bring all four walls of the box together, and then you want to squeeze up towards your head. And then you have to completely and fully relax and let go, because if something goes up, it must come down. And the reason I'm the no Kegel person is because I believe that first you must be able to release, relax, and let go, because that is the beginning of inviting someone in to enter your vagina, right? When we open and release and let go, right? But so many of us are holding tight, and then that becomes an issue of pain with penetration. So I believe first that you learn how to release and let go, and I call this a reverse Kegel. And then once you master that, and by the way, it's very difficult for women to let go. We're constantly holding. And I think an issue with fertility also, if the pelvic floor muscles is too tight, we bring it back to the fertility. It's going to create an effect on the uterus where the uterus can come out of position, right? Because the pelvic floor muscles do hold the uterus in its proper position. So when there's tightness in one of those walls, whatever the case may be, you have to do a self-evaluation. Then you have to do some internal massaging to create the flexibility. So I like the vaginal massaging and the reverse Kegel before I institute up training or a Kegel program. And then, of course, I want to make sure there's no scars in the belly or in the pelvic floor, because we would have to address those first too.
Well, it's definitely more involved than you would think.
It's very involved. And that's why, I have a lot of OBGYNs in New York City who are my friends, and I'm constantly telling them, I say, you've got to stop telling women that there's 6-week checkup to go home and do Kegels, because you are doing them a big disservice. And you have to stop doing this, especially if there's been obstetrical trauma, okay? And there's been a scar or there's been an episiotomy. The last thing you want is to contract around an injured muscle. It doesn't even make sense.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Because, so I'm a mom. I have two babies, age 2.5 and 5. So I've been
congratulations.
Thank you. So I've been through this whole birth thing twice. And both of the babies were delivered vaginally. Like I had them both in my house, which was
wonderful.
a lovely experience. So then I didn't feel any pressure to like prep my vagina. Like I didn't feel any pressure to like work out. So I didn't engage in any like vaginal exercises. Like I wasn't like, okay, I need to like take my vagina to the gym or anything. But my personal experience was that my vagina just healed over time. It took a while. Like it takes several weeks even in the beginning stages. And then, my experience was that over time, my vagina healed and it seemed to be back to normal, and I didn't have to do anything. So my question is there a bit of a misconception that like birth destroys the vagina and like it doesn't have the capacity to heal and we have to do stuff to it? Or is there some, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of like the myth, like, oh my goodness, you have children and then your vagina totally changes and it's totally loose. And is there any truth to that?
I think it really depends on the birth experience and what happened.
Okay.
And whether there was there trauma, was there assisted forceps, was there excessive pushing, was there support in the room for the woman? I mean, it's very different when a woman feels very supported in her birthing experience and she has a doula and she's birthing at home, where you really compare that to someone in the hospital is on fetal monitoring, is told she can't change positions, right, which is more of the norm in America, 50% cesarean rate. So for me, it really depends. Does everybody need pelvic rehab? I say yes, absolutely, 100%, regardless of whether there was trauma or not. But it depends, how much do you need? How much was the healing process on its own natural? But if you've been in a situation where you've had an episiotomy, where you've had a cesarean, where there's been instrumentation, where you just don't feel right in your lady parts, and all of us know what that is, or sex doesn't feel the same, and I believe sex should feel the same as it did before you had a baby, then that's a situation where I would explore and figure out, what do I need to get my pelvic floor muscles in top shape? And not every woman needs, if you're an athlete, you need more training, you need more vaginal gym training than somebody who is sitting at a desk all day, right? If you're doing Zumba or impact or African dance, or you're doing Barry's gym, or you're doing Physique 57, I mean, I see tons of people from all different kinds of gyms, then you may need more power, right? And so you may need to lift some weights for your vagina once we create the balance. So it really depends. I mean, I'm a firm believer that no matter what, if a baby has come out through these muscles, they need rehab. And in other countries like France, pelvic floor therapy is given to every woman, regardless of what happened at the birth. And this is the norm in their countries. I like to see that happen here. This has been my mission for the past 12 years, is to get this work recognized.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that before. And I remember the first time I heard that, I just thought, wow, like if it, I mean, that does mean that there's this important need that's being addressed. So maybe share with us then, is there anything, so for the women who fall into the camp of, I have not yet had a baby, or, maybe I'm planning to have a baby, is there anything that we can do in the general sense to strengthen our pelvic floor, or to just be more aware of it or support it, obviously without just jumping to Kegels?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things you can do. I mean, there's 1,000 things you can do, literally. You could do simple vaginal massaging, and I think that once you call it more like a sensual massage, especially if you're just thinking about having a baby, you want to prepare that area. It sort of juices it up, makes you more connected, makes you feel more hot when things are really juicy, down in your vagina. So I'm a big believer in internal vaginal massages. I'm a big believer in external vaginal massaging, because the beauty about the pelvic floor is that you can have access to them on the external genitalia. You don't have to go inside. So if you're doing a lot of biking, you may want to, do some labial rolling, roll your labias. You may do something, which one of my massages I call the Venus massage, which is sort of massaging the area between the anus and the vagina. I also call it ground central station, because everything has a deep connection there. It's the foundation of the first chakra. And I find that that's a real nice sensual massage, but it also keeps the muscles very flexible and supple, so that if you want to engage in, gym exercises or Kegel exercises, you're creating a counterbalance with that kind of massage too. You can do hip opening exercises, which I love. I love yoga. I created a yoga program called Press Yoga to keep the pelvic floor muscles flexible and to help the low back. So you can do yoga. Hip opening exercises are fantastic. I love meditation and diaphragmatic breathing. I love mind body. I mean, there's so many things, but that's a good start.
Well, and I'm going to ask you, so when you say internal vaginal massage, I want to know what that looks like. I kind of had the picture. So the labia massage, so that's your outer lips, right? And so you kind of do you just kind of open, obviously this is a radio show, so it's hard to but just to get a sense, are we just, because when you were talking, I realized, I'm like, you know what? We're talking about muscles here. And if I have a sore back, it makes total sense for me to get a massage. So why would it be any different with my pelvic floor muscles? It was just, I never really thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's a muscle like any other muscle in the body. It can get trigger points. It can get spasms. It can get scar tissue. It can have myofascial restrictions. It can have tender points. And that's why sometimes penetrative sex can be painful or it can be uncomfortable. So for me, it's like, you put the finger inside the vagina, or you can use your vibrator, or you can use something called a dilator. And you want to, remember I said that the vagina is a box and it's also a tunnel. Then we want to imagine the vaginal opening as a clock. And we don't want to touch 12 o'clock because that's where the bladder is. So we don't want to hurt that area. But you can massage anywhere between the 4 and the 8 o'clock position and do like nice half moon stroke. There's 11 techniques that I have. There's a lot. Oh, no, maybe 12 because I do facilitation. So there's a lot of different techniques that you can learn. I teach all this stuff in my online course. But simply, you can just put your thumb at the 6 o'clock position and just press down, which is what women who are thinking about conceiving will also do, right? To start the perineal massage. And you can do this in pregnancy, of course, with your doctor's permission, midwife's permission.
That is fascinating. And so then, of course, as you're describing that, I know one of the topics that you talk about in your book is pain with sex, vaginisms. I don't know how to say it
vaginismus, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is spasms, like where your vagina is actually like tightening, like a muscle spasm. Is that correct?
Totally. Yeah, totally. It's like in vaginismus, what you find is that it's so closed up that a lot of women can't even find their vaginal opening. So it takes a long time to even consummate a marriage. So some women come to me because they haven't consummated their marriages because they're so tight and nothing can fit inside. And nothing is more disheartening than you find the love of your life and then you can have this passionate, intimate, romantic, and amazing relationship because there's an issue of pain. So a lot of women come to see me because of pain, sexual pain, or they come to see me because they're not feeling, and when there's sexual pain, there's usually a correlation to menstrual cramps. They go together like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, if there's menstrual cramps, it's going to trigger the pelvic floor muscles to become tight as a response. It's just a protective response, So I find with menstrual cramps, because we're talking about fertility and everything, if you do the vaginal massages, the menstrual cramps get better and the sex gets better.
Well, and a very, very, very long time ago, it was when I first started my podcast. So about 3 years ago, I did an episode on sexual abuse and infertility. And so, of course, there's lots of different reasons. There's so many reasons. But as you say that, I often think, well, it's not always easy for everybody to connect with their body in that way and to think about massaging their vagina. There's a lot of emotional energy around our lady parts, whether it's just internalized shame. A lot of women think that their vaginas and vulvas are ugly. There's something wrong with them. So then to have to interact with their vaginas in this way, and I imagine it might be challenging for a lot of women to remove some of that shame and just interact with it like a muscle.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And listen, I've treated over 14,704 women. I've overseen over 52,000 pelvic sessions in my healing center in New York City. And a lot of women in the first session, they cry. And I just hold space for them because I understand that they've been through a lot. And so for me, there's many ways to skin a cat. So if they're not prepared to do the internal work, then we do the external work. And, I cover that in great detail in many of my classes. And I believe that if you do the external work, the massaging externally, you massage your thighs and you can even start massaging your breasts just to open up the whole area, and getting the muscle to release and let go through exercising and breath, because the pelvic floor muscles are deeply connected to the diaphragm. So as you inhale, right, the diaphragm goes down and then you can start to open up and let the pelvic floor muscles relax. And as you exhale, the diaphragm goes up and then the pelvic floor muscles also go up, right? So they have a relationship to each other. So many times I have to start very gently and softly, especially as we know with the Me Too and the Time's Up, that there's a lot of trauma that women have been holding in for so long. And now everybody is coming out. It's like people are telling women are expressing themselves and what's happened. But then what happens then? How do we help them heal their pelvises? Once we know, once they've said, yes, this has happened to me, this, where do we go from there? So my thing is like, how do I empower them so that they understand that, yes, they can help themselves in a way that makes sense to them. And it could be in a gentle, slow fashion, that it doesn't have to be fast, that it doesn't have to be right away, do an internal massage. And I train a lot of physical therapists and midwives and a slew of other different kinds of health professionals. And one of the things that I talk to them about is this sensitivity of meeting the woman where she's at and not overriding it because you want to accomplish something that you think needs to be accomplished. So when they come to me and they shed their tears and they tell me their stories, I hold space and I say, okay, let's find another way. Let's do it through abdominal massaging. Let's do it through basic stretching. Let's do it through breath. Let's do it through meditation, so that they can start to prepare themselves for the work that actually is going to get them to the finish line. So we have to really deeply respect we have to meet them where they are, right? So I think sometimes that healthcare practitioners are so involved in like the goal or where they think a person should be that they forget that we're dealing with somebody who's deeply hurt, and we have to hold them and we have to respect that. And the beauty of what I do is that I have many different options that I can give a woman. So if the internal work is something that is just very too much for her at the moment, and trust me, at least thousands of women have come to me and said, no, I can't do this work right now. What do? You still have to help them. So then I work with the thighs, I work with the belly, I work with the back, I align the pelvis. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do that doesn't require the internal. And then they start to trust their bodies, and then they start to trust you, and then we progress the program.
Well, you've really transformed my understanding of the pelvic floor already, and we are only halfway through our interview. I have all these thoughts flooding through my head, and I had this thought that I want to share with you, and it's that if for anyone who's had like a regular like massage of their back or something like that, it can be incredibly, like, obviously it feels nice. It's very like it's pleasant, depending on how deeply, but generally speaking, it's pleasant. But there's all these other things that can happen just by touching certain points of your body and really kind of getting in there. Energy can be released, right? Like you said, you're working with someone, they start to cry. But ultimately what's happening is you have somebody kind of gently and lovingly massaging your body. And the thought that came to mind is that, how many women out there have never really had that kind of kind, gentle touch in that area that's not sexual, and that is kind of in that same way of a massage, trying to loosen the muscles. And literally it's kind of like love in a physical sense that is not sexual, but it's, what I'm not really articulating it very well, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
No, totally. Like, when I train my PTs, when I train the people in my professional courses, I say, this work is not about, it's a calling. Like, you have to deeply love women to do this work. And you have to have a deep respect for them. And the most important thing I find is listening. I mean, really listening, right? Because, a woman would tell me a story, I can tell you in 5 minutes what the issue is. What do I have to do? Where do I have to take her? And how I'm going to do it. So I think listening and letting them know that it's all about love, and it's all about self-love. And so many of us are, I hear it almost every other day. I hate the way my vagina looks. So my vaginal lips are too big, or one is too small, or I hear stupid things like the man would say, oh, you're not tight enough for me. That's when I feel like getting the man on the phone. I'm like, I need to speak to your partner. Please get me on the phone with him, because I'm going to do a little education here. Okay.
Do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I bring the partners in.
So much.
My favorite part is when I tell the woman, when I'm hearing his, when I'm listening and connected, I say, I'd like you to bring your partner in. I'm going to show him how to massage your vagina the right way. With no sexuality, with no nothing, but you do it because you love her, and because she's in pain, and because ultimately you're going to feel more connected. So many men come in, I swear to God, they get so nervous. And I'm holding their finger and I'm saying, well, this is how you stretch it. This is how you do it. And they're like shaking. The other day I had a guy that was so freaked out, he couldn't come into the room.
Wow.
Could not come into the room. I'm like, well, he's having sex with you. What is the big deal?
That's what I like. That's literally, you picked the word from my brain. I was like, but you think nothing of like having sex with her, but you can't touch her in a non-sexual way in that area.
Can you imagine that?
With the
I
lights
said,
on?
I wanted this. I was just trying to hold it. I was just like, don't get mad. Hold it together. Hold space. People are nervous, But you can just say she has sex even though she has pain. And I'm like, why do you do that? Why do you do that? Oh, because, he needs it. I'm like, no, this is about you. This is about your body. This is your temple. And I teach my daughter this too. I'm like, if it doesn't feel right, then something's not right. And you need to figure out what it is. And you need to bring the partner in so that they're part of it, because sometimes they feel isolated too, They're hanging out in the, you're doing your vaginal work. They don't know what you're doing. So I always encourage the participation of the partner, whether it be male, female, to come in and to learn these different techniques so that they can use them as a form to heal their relationship and their connection.
Well, this is incredible. Can you tell us, because you've worked with so many women, could you tell us maybe a story or like combine a couple different client stories you've had where they have come in with a significant challenge, painful sex, and through these techniques they've actually experienced like a reduction or complete elimination of these symptoms, the pain with sex?
Sure. There's the one story that comes into mind. A young couple. Very young couple, they're young and they're innocent, but she has vaginismus. They were married for 2 years. Can you believe it? But they were doing all external, I call it outer course. Wow. I teach outer course because I think outer course for women who are not feeling as healthy in their pelvic floor as possible is a really good way to still feel the connection, So they come in and she comes in and she has like 10 different dildos. And she goes, I've tried everything. And I'm looking at her and I'm looking at him and I'm like, oh boy. All right. And she was so freaked out, right? Even when I lay her down on the thing, I said, well, let's examine the muscles only externally. She had a big freak out, sat up, closed her legs and said, I can't do this. Now, this is 2 years of an unconsummated marriage, right?
Wow.
I said, everything's cool. Don't worry. This happens all the time. This is a new experience for you. I don't want you to feel bad. This is the way it is. I explained to the husband, try to keep him calm. Everybody in the room was having a breakdown. So I'm like, okay, everybody just, we're going to just talk this out. And I had them start with some partner yoga exercises. And then I had them do some gentle massaging of the scalp to bring down the anxiety, right? Then I had them do partner foam rolling into the inner thighs, which is like the big, deep connection to the vagina. Then I said, I just want you to rub her on the outside of her pants. And then I told her, and you're going to do it on yourself too. And then I started her with just looking at her vagina and breathing into it. I mean, it was a process.
Yeah.
Okay, it was
this
a process.
Was not like a 30-minute situation.
Oh, no. I wish it was. I'm like, when is this going to happen, I'm like, okay, And it just went on and on and on. But by the end, they had consummated their marriage. She was like on the biggest, because you have to go one size bigger than your partner when you're trying to stretch out the vagina. So they penetrate, so in and out is easy. And she writes me a note, like we're having great sex, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, this is wonderful. And so I think that those kind of success stories happen every day in my center. They happen every day when I work with women. And but it's just about meeting women where they're at. There's been a lot of trauma and sexual abuse, and a lot of the women that I treat have been sexually abused. We have to go gingerly into the night, and we have to meet them where they're at. And hopefully the partner is respectful and understands that. And if not, then maybe that's not the person for you, If there's pressure, if you don't feel comfortable, if you feel compromised, then you have to have an examination of everything. The thing is with this work, because it does open up the energy and it makes them feel more confident and more like, connected to their sexuality, even their walk changes, you know, they start to think, oh, maybe there's somebody else out there who's going to appreciate me a little bit more, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to say to that?
No. Well, it's so interesting because, I mean, a woman's like your vulva is part of you. And so, yes, it's obviously like there's a lot of connotations with it, but it's a part of you. So it's so interesting that a woman's partner could have such a difficult time interacting with her vulva in a non-sexual way. But it's not surprising, but it just there's so many layers to the examples that you gave us and what we've been talking about. Even when you said that you were working with a woman who had pain every time she had sex, but she had sex because she thought her partner needed it. And then I used to work in a sexual assault center. I used to do like education. I used to go to schools and talk about myths and stuff like that. So I've got this this interesting background that leads me to, that place where you want to take the man out to the side and be like, yo, what's so I could totally like relate to that. But, like I think to myself, where are we at as a culture where your partner can see you in pain and keep going? Like, I don't even want to go there.
Listen, and I'm going to tell you, Lisa, it's absolutely, it's disheartening for me. And I have to tell you that women will do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? And then I become like, why are you doing this? Your tissue, pain is there as an indicator that something is not right, that it needs to be addressed. It's like a warning, And if you just lay there and enjoy it, what is that? I mean, what value are you putting on yourself? And I don't mean to be harsh on women, and I don't mean to be dogmatic, but at the same time, respect for self-love comes first. Mm-hmm. Self-pleasure, pleasure for us has to be the thing that moves us forward, right? That we don't become just lay there and bear it. I can't tell you, sometimes I write a note to the husband and say she's not allowed to have sexual intercourse. She's in physical therapy, and she's part of my online program until I say she can.
Yeah,
it's like I'm writing a doctor's note. It's unbelievable that I even have to do that. And the women are like, "Can you please write it?"
Yes, I can see that. Yeah, they don't want to have that conversation. They don't want to have to. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's really sort of like sometimes it's very shocking to me because these super cosmopolitan women, very successful CEOs. And I'm like, holy wow. Like you would think, maybe the audience is thinking, well, what kind of woman is that? Well, let me tell you that I treat a lot of the high power CEOs in New York City. Right?
Well, this is not, I feel like this is not individual woman's thing. This is not like, this is a pervasive cultural idea.
Yeah.
I mean, for women, like, I don't know if I can, like, I don't know that many women who would stand up and say, my vagina is beautiful. It is perfect.
I do have that as a mantra.
Exactly that.
As a mantra. I do have vaginal mantras and vaginal meditations, and I have them take the mirror out, and that's the first step.
But like, why do we need a mantra?
Kindly to your vagina.
How many men already think that? You know what I'm saying, right? Because most women wouldn't necessarily think that, but it's complicated. It's complicated.
It's very complicated. And the thing is, most women come to me and they tell me right away, I don't like the way my vagina looks. I took out the mirror and I have a book that shows many different types of vulvas. And I'm like, well, you see, it's like a face. No two look alike. And you were made in total perfection. And so let's talk about this. Why is it that you don't like this? And what does that mean to you? And then I do have them do a lot of work with a mirror. Because, I can't tell you how many. I always ask somebody, when was the last time you looked at your vagina? And some people be like, wow, years.
It's your vagina.
Well, we're encouraged to do monthly breast exams, right?
Yeah.
Why are we not encouraged to do vulvovaginal exams on ourselves? I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's part of female body that needs an examination also.
Well, we've got a couple minutes left. I want to ask you, we've kind of talked around it, but I want to ask you specifically about orgasms because
Mm.
you mentioned that we can have stronger orgasms through this same process that we're talking about, that if you're having painful sex or these types of we're scratching the surface today. We could have 6 podcasts and talk about I know that they're just given all the different topics you cover in your book, but I'm interested in that topic because it kind of lends itself to what we were talking about already, but we're not even talking about orgasms. We're talking about women who are having sex that's painful. So likely, I don't know if there's an orgasm at the end of painful sex. I don't know. But even the topic of orgasm, where my personal belief is that if I'm having sex, I actually expect to orgasm. I expect it.
Oh yeah,
because
totally.
I don't see why it should be any different for me. I have never met a man who didn't expect to orgasm at the end of it. So I expect to orgasm at the end of it. Like that's just literally an expectation. But when I say that to women, they're like, "What do you mean?" Like,
yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I treat a lot of women with sexual dysfunction. I mean, that's, they have never orgasms. Can you imagine that? Or whose orgasms are so weak they don't even know if they have one. So what drives women in to see me and take my programs is, one, they want to have beautiful and amazing sex, and 2, their orgasms are just petering out. So the pelvic floor muscles are very deeply connected to the clitoris, and they actually wrap around the clitoris. And when there's a the nerve depolarizes, and let's get down to the science of it, the pelvic floor muscles contract, and that's that contraction that you feel with the orgasm. And it contracts around the clitoris, and then you get a better orgasm, right? So the pelvic floor muscles are very sexual muscles, and they're part of our sexual function. So if they're tight, you either have no orgasms or weak orgasms. If they're weak, it's the same thing. You either have no orgasms or very weak orgasms. And women come to me because they want to have better sex and better orgasms. And they're sick and tired of not coming. And as a matter of fact, half of my people are dealing with sexual dysfunction. So we really want to make the pelvic floor muscles, what is going on with them that's preventing that expression from happening, that big powwow orgasm, right? And then we figure that out. Is it strength? Is it weakness? Is it tightness? Is it trigger points? Is it scar? I mean, it could be a slew of things. Correct for that. And then start to get her on some chakra exercises, and then there's some Kegel exercises, and maybe even some vaginal weights or some yoni eggs. I work a lot with the yoni eggs to get her to open up.
And the yoni egg, it's an actual kind of egg shaped, and you put it inside of your vagina?
Yeah.
To open?
To open, because right now there's too many yoni egg programs that are all about squeezing, and women think they're going to reach Nirvana by doing that. And when actually they're going to get into more dysfunction. So I use the yoni egg in very different ways, and I also use vaginal weights. I use it more as a way to help women to feel what's going on in their pelvic floor muscles on a minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour basis, right? So some of us are holding really tight all the time, and so the muscles are becoming very weak. So if there's tightness, there's weakness, and then your orgasms are either non-existent or weak too, or petering. Like you're like, oh, what the hell was that? Did I come? Or you're trying to figure it out. So I like to bring that awareness first. So I use it as a proprioceptive tool that tells women, okay, this is what's happening inside, and I'm gripping all the time. Let me try to open and release, and let me try to create that flexibility and suppleness, and then I can contract and get my power, right? Mm-hmm. But most women are just holding. They're holding every day. They don't even know they're holding.
Mm-hmm. So this is the balance. It's like we open, and then once we at least have some practice letting go, releasing, opening, then we can balance it with the strengthening so that it's not one-sided and problematic.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And I think that's why I believe that Kegels are over-prescribed, And so when people come to me, they're like, what the hell? Where's my Kegels? I'm like, well, you have no business Kegeling. You don't even know how to open. You don't even know how to let go. How the hell are you going to do a Kegel? You're just going to do like a half-ass Kegel, And I have like 25 different types of Kegels that are prescribed too. Wow. So it's not just one way to Kegel. There's 1,000 ways that you can target the body. But it's really interesting when they come to me and they're like, well, my doctor told me to do Kegels, and then I have to call the doctor and say, listen, she has a big old scar and pain. She's not a candidate for Kegels. Because then it's like, it's like, who do they listen to? Yeah. Right? So then I have to educate the doctor so that he understands not to overprescribe it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, even if it were appropriate at some point in the future, once she's fully healed, it's definitely not appropriate while her body's still not even
balanced.
Yeah. So I'm going to cut this little part out. I want to ask you, Isa, do you have 10 minutes or should we just stop now? Okay.
Yeah, I have 10 minutes.
All right. I just wanted to ask because I want to ask you 2 more questions.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about orgasm and sex, and there was just one topic that I wanted to circle back to. Earlier in the interview, you talked about prolapse. And I was hoping you could, I've heard that word a lot. I have some understanding of what it is, and I think maybe many of the listeners do as well, but what exactly is it? And then when does it happen? I think you've alluded to that, but maybe we can just go into it a little.
Okay. Well, first of all, 49% of women have one sort of prolapse, and prolapses are graded from grade 1 to 4, 4 being outside the body. And the things that can prolapse are your uterus, your vagina itself, your bladder, your intestines, and your rectum. And there's different fancy names for that. Prolapses can occur for many reasons. I find women who have not had children, their prolapsing occurs from doing a lot of impact activities, doing a lot of forceful work at the gym, or different kinds of exercises that are maybe not appropriate for the level of strength of the pelvic floor muscles, or constipation and constantly pushing, or pushing with urination, right? Because women get that feeling that they haven't completely emptied, right? Or there's hesitation in the urine, or they're suffering from urge incontinence, which means they have to pee all the time. So it can those are the different types of prolapses you can have, and there's different severities, there's different grades, and different how they come into the vagina is how you grade them, with 4 being outside the vagina. The pelvic floor muscles are incredible. When they are super strong and balanced, they can help with prolapse. And I there's a lot of women who come to me for prolapse work. So the pelvic floor muscles has a big supportive ability. So it supports the organs in its proper places. And when they're weak or too tight or too stressed out, these organs can fall into the vagina, right? Because it's a cradle, right? The pelvic floor muscles are like a cradle. There's a slew of things that can affect the prolapse. I mean, I've covered, I think, the top 3. Hysterectomies are a big one. Any kind of myomectomies, anything that's disrupted the abdominal fascia can lead cesarean. Although women think that because nothing's come out of the vaginas, they won't prolapse, but the integrity of the fascial tissues has been compromised. So yes, they are at a higher risk for prolapse, and also because they've been holding a baby inside for 9 months and the muscles are compromised. So that also can lead to prolapsing. I find marathon runners, I treat a lot of marathon runners who are prolapsed, and they're young and they have no children. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I mean, they're always kind of putting that that weight on that force, I guess I should say, that pressure.
Yeah. And the thing is that they look so athletic, right? Yeah. And they look so perfect. You're like, because nothing could be wrong with her vagina. She has a perfect vagina. And actually 37% of athletes have suffer from stress incontinence. So there you go. Even the young, even the young doesn't escape it.
Well, so I feel like we've really uncovered so much information in our interview. I'm really happy that we were able to have you on the show. And after everything we've spoken about today, what is the biggest takeaway that you want the listener to take from our conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway that I want the women to understand is that there are natural and integrative ways to heal your pelvic floor. That you don't need surgeries, that you don't need injections, and that you don't need medications. That there are natural ways to heal that are very super effective. I'm not saying that those things don't have their place, but I'm saying that this therapy is the first line of defense. And that's what I want women to know, because then women get into trouble and there's no reversing a lot of these procedures once they come into play. So that's the big takeaway, and I want them to know that there's always help and that they can help themselves and they don't have to look external to themselves as long as they have the proper guidance.
That's a wonderful place to end on. And of course, for women then kind of all over, is it fairly easy to find a pelvic floor therapist or physical therapist? Like, is it common enough that most women in larger centers would be able to access them? They would just have to look and kind of do a little bit of searching?
Sure, absolutely. I think they just have to do some searching and make sure that they're with the right therapist.
Okay. Well,
yeah, they can definitely find.
Oh, thank you. Yes. And now for the listeners then who are really inspired and they want to learn more about you and what you do, I know you mentioned some of your programs that are coming up. So where can our listeners go to get more information about you and what you do and get a copy of your book and, really get those wonderful, juicy pelvic floor muscles in wonderful repair?
Totally. Well, definitely come to pelvicpainrelief.com. That's my portal page where I have my online programs for vaginal healing for women. And if you're a professional, I also train professionals to do that. So pelvicpainrelief.com. My book is on Amazon. They can always pick up a book there. Female Pelvic Alchemy. I also have Ending Female Pain, and I also have Ending Pain in Pregnancy. I've written 3 books about the pelvic floor in different stages of women's lives. So you can pick the book that's appropriate for you. And that's it. I mean, I'm really easy to find. I'm all over the web and social media. But the website would be the number one place to come and see me and find me.
Okay, great. Well, we will link to all of those places.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And Isa, thank you so much for being here. You have really deepened my understanding of the pelvic floor, and I'm just really thrilled to be able to share this interview with my audience.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me. It was really a great pleasure. I really appreciate it, Lisa. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/201. That's fertilityfriday.com/201. I hope that you enjoyed my episode with Isa. It was such a treat having her on the show. And after our interview, we actually kept chatting for a couple of minutes. And one of the things that I said to her is, she really transformed my way of thinking about the vagina. Now, although I have an idea about the pelvic floor muscles and how they work, really hearing how she talked about them, it really occurred to me in this interview that these are, in fact, muscles, and meaning that they respond in the same way to our other muscles. And, the part of the interview where we talked about basically the vaginal massage, both internal and external, and how that can help to open and release and basically help to release some of that energy that's trapped into the vagina and help the muscles themselves to relax and release, to open and to allow sex to happen without pain. I feel like that was one of the most powerful parts of the interview because it never really occurred to me how that connection of muscle tightness, what a significant role that could play in sex and in orgasms and in just being able to have an orgasm, just to be able to have sex. And I feel that her examples of clients who were literally married and were not able to have penetrative sex because of that tightness, and how long it basically took to really open those muscles through a series of different massage, techniques and modalities. So I think that is just very, very powerful. And I think it's also interesting that it's the second time I've heard that women in France, when they give birth, they just have, as a standard, they have pelvic floor physiotherapy. And I think Jessica Drumma may have spoken about that in our interview together. So I'll link that episode to this one in case you want to hear another episode on a similar topic. Because in my episode with Jessica, we also addressed pelvic floor physiotherapy. And so it's very eye-opening. And another thing that occurred to me as I was doing my interview with Isa is how critical this particular piece of women's healthcare is. And it's very interesting how it's basically missing in our kind of modern standard of care. And it's really sad because this is something that's very particular to women. And there's certain periods of our lives, certain events, certain situations where this would become more critical. And it really does impair the quality of life. I mean, if you're struggling with incontinence, if you're not able to hold your bladder, or if you're struggling with issues of having to go to the bathroom all the time, or feeling like you have a small bladder and you always got to pee, those are issues that can be related to your pelvic floor. And not having that, like when you go to your physician and you talk about these things, if they're not aware of these techniques and if they're not really in the know in terms of pelvic floor physiotherapy, then often these complaints are either not addressed or ignored, or perhaps you're given some sort of medication, or as Isa talked about, perhaps you're given some sort of surgery, and depending on how serious it is. And ultimately, just by going through this fairly non-invasive modality in terms of massage therapy in the area, you could basically reverse and eliminate a lot of these symptoms in a very natural and non-invasive way. So this is a critical piece of women's healthcare, and I'm really happy that I was able to really delve into this topic with Isa today. And so shout out to Isa. Thanks again for coming on the show. It was a great episode. So don't forget to head over to fertilityfriday.com/workwithme for more information about my fertility awareness programs. Whether you are wanting to jump in and learn how to chart your cycles and use fertility awareness as your primary method of birth control, or whether you're really wanting some support interpreting your charts and timing accurately for conception, again, that's fertilityfriday.com/workwithme. And if you're not sure about which program would be the best fit, make sure to set up a 15-minute consultation with me so we can really go through and figure out which program would be the best fit. And so I just want to thank you so much for hanging out with me today, spending some time with me, listening to the podcast, supporting the show. I really appreciate all of you for listening to the show and for being here and supporting the show. It's been so much fun for me to get to know some of you in the Facebook group. If you're not part of the Fertility Friday Facebook community, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/community. So we'll be talking about today's episode in there, and we always have some really great discussions going on in there. So if you're not yet part of the community, make sure to head over and join us. And so whether you're listening on the go, whether you are driving to work and a part of your commute, or if you're working out, going for a walk, doing laundry, or other housework, I really appreciate you taking the time to tune in and listen to the show. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.